cinematic look that is really famous within my circle. People really like it. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to create my personal high contrast cinematic look that is really famous within my circle. People really like it. And in the next lesson, I'm going to be using the same footage to show you how to create the faded contrast look, which is also equally famous in the entire world. So there are two types of things you can do. You can either choose to create a high contrast cinematic look, or you can do a faded contrast, whichever goes with your style and whichever your client prefers. This is my personal technique. This is how I've built my own style and everything, and eventually you will be able to build your own style. So I've already converted my footage to Rec 709, and I've left the first note for noise reduction, and R means noise reduction. I've already fixed the white balance of my footage, so I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the exposure and contrast. And slowly, with every lesson and with every section, you're seeing how I keep building my own node tree, and I work on one node with lighting, another with advanced, and then contrast and saturation and everything else. And by the end of this course, you will have the entire familiarity with the node tree as to which thing goes where, and you will be able to develop your own style. So I'm hoping that you're getting a lot more information from here, because I'm dispensing years and years of information over here. And the way I'm teaching you, if you keep practicing it, trust me, you will be able to absorb years worth of knowledge, as well as if you practice it every day, I can guarantee you that you will go up to the level of somebody who has 4 or 5 years of experience within 6 months to a year. It all depends on how much time you put into it every day and every week. That's all that makes the difference. So I have my exposure node set over here. Of course, the subject is the focus over here, but her face is really dark. It's in the shadows. The midtones are also pretty dark. And when you look at the footage for the first time, your focus doesn't go on the subject. It goes around here first. That's not the focus. And then it goes over here. So how do we bring the focus to our subject? Let's work on that part. So first of all, I'm going to adjust the overall lighting. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up gamma, because I want to light up my subject properly. But of course, like when I bring up gamma, it also brings up the gain, because, you know, now that we've established and we've understood that it also affects all of the other areas. All right. So with that being said and done, I'm going to go ahead and bring down gain a little bit. It is going to have a little bit of effect on my gamma as well. So this is going to be like a process. I can go ahead and start working on offset overall, but that's still working on the midtone. So it's going to be a little bit of gamble, but it's okay, because now we have access to power windows. So I've made as many adjustments as I could. This is how it looked before. This is how it looks after. And then when I am satisfied with the primary settings, I can go ahead and start working with power windows. All right. So I can use power windows for all different kinds of reasons and for all different kinds of settings. And I will show you how to use power windows for lighting and for contrast over here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and make another node. I'm going to call this subject lighting. So this is where I'm going to be working on my subject. So I will create a power window around my subject first. And there are different ways of doing it. People do it in different ways. So there is no one set way of working on these things. So if you see somebody doing something else, that's completely fine. That's just your personal style and your preference and everything else. All right. So I will create that around my subject. So I have it. The focus over here is her face, and of course the rest of her as well, but the main focus is her face. So remember, I told you that the softness, I will bump it up to at least 5 points, because that's where it starts getting softer and I don't see other stuff happening around. So just to make sure, because I just taught it to you, I'm going to go ahead on the top left part, press highlight to see if I'm selecting most of my subjects. So here it's spilling a little bit outside, so I'm going to bring it to the right side, and boom, I'm done. Okay. And now I want to work on my subject. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the gamma. That's working better in terms of the lighting. So now do you see, like before, this is how it was with the general lighting settings that I fixed in the entire footage. So that's why I wasn't able to control everything, because all of the wheels were controlling all parts of the footage. So that's really only helpful when you're making changes to the entire video, but then I can use power windows to bring more emphasis towards my subject, right? And then I'm gonna be doing another thing. So I can do either add outside or add parallel. I'm gonna choose to do add parallel because I don't want a whole series of nodes and everything going all over everywhere. So I'm gonna call this background lighting, and then I'm gonna make another circle, another power window around my subject. But now we know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to select the area that's outside of our selection, and that's where we're going to control our settings. All right, and I'm going to increase the softness, and then I see that the subject is selected again over here, so I'm going to press this icon, and just to make sure that it has selected everything. My subjects here are a little bit in the selection, so oops, sorry. My subjects here are a little bit in the selection, so I'm gonna go ahead and place this right there, around here. Part of it is falling outside, so, and that's fine to an extent because this cannot be perfect, remember, okay? So I'm gonna come outside of the highlight area, and now I'm gonna start darkening the entire area. So over here, I see a lot of, so one thing I can do is I can just bring down the entire offset, and that's gonna decrease the overall lighting in the background, but it looks a bit weird. It's like, okay, where's this light coming from? All of it, if everything else is dark outside. So what I'm gonna do over here is, first of all, I'm going to bring down, gain so that there is less highlights outside. So now it looks a little bit natural. I want the transition from here to here to be very subtle. And I will show you another way of doing it that's complex. I don't want you to do it too much, but I'll teach you how to do it. So if I turn this off, if I turn these off, this is how it looks. And this is how it looks now. So much better and everything, right? I want to go ahead and work on the lighting just a little bit. I want to bring down the gain slightly so that the transition is not too hard and difficult when things move out of this power window to another one. So I'm going to keep it at 0.97. Let's see. I guess now it looks much more natural. So let me select all of these nodes first, and then let's zoom in and see. So this is how it looks with all of the settings applied with the power windows. And when I take out all of them, this is how it looked with only the primary and basic lighting correction. So again, there's a lot more focus going to the background, even though it's blurred. Blurring the background is one way of bringing more emphasis to the areas that are in focus, but that's not working because these are much lighter than the subject and this part too. But when I turn it on, now I have a lot more focus on my subject, right? So next thing I can do is, and I want to teach you one very important thing over here, is how to make compound nodes. All right, I can choose to make one node after another, and then I can select them and make a compound node. All right, and then I can go inside that node and make my changes to the specific single nodes over there. So I'll show you what I basically mean. So for example, if I select these 3 nodes and I right click on them and I go and click on create compound node, it is going to turn all of those nodes into one node. So now when I turn it off, essentially I'm turning off my white balance as well as my basic lighting corrections. When I turn it on, I turn on all of the settings that are inside this node. And if I double click on it, it takes me inside the node. Now I can individually work on, let's say, the white balance, turn off the exposure, maybe just keep the white balance and keep the exposure off. But if I want to come outside of this zone, I'm simply going to click over here anywhere on this bar and it's going to bring me outside. So this is one way of keeping things very clean in terms of your node tree and everything. Because having too many nodes does get confusing and it does get a bit frustrating, right? So I can right click on it and then I can give this compound node any label, but I'm just showing you exactly what we're doing. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn these on, go back outside, and I want to come outside of this view. So I'm gonna right outside of this setting. So I'm gonna right click on the compound node and it's gonna give me this option, decompose compound node. If I click on it, it brings me back to the individual node settings. All right, so this is something very important I wanted to show you because sometimes it can get a bit confusing. So I've made my lighting changes over here. I don't want to make a lot more because I want to show you exactly what I'm going to do with specific other areas and everything, right? Because I'm going to make different power windows on my subject's face and everything. So remember, with the exposure, I've corrected the exposure node or the lighting node. I've made basic lighting corrections to my footage. And then over here, I have made specific lighting areas that are affecting different areas of my footage. So now I'm going to go ahead and add another node. All right. So I have that over here. I'm going to bring my CST way down maybe. And I just like to keep it tighter because, you know, it just sometimes gets too crowded over here. So I just like to keep it a little tighter. I just get a bit finicky sometimes, but that's okay. That really depends on your personal preferences. All right. And I just want to make sure that you understand how nodes are going from one to another. So here I'm going to call it contrast. And I want to make specific changes to the overall, I want to make general changes, to the overall contrast. In the previous lessons, we learned how to do basic changes and specific basic changes to our contrast. So I'll bring up the contrast slider that's already affecting everything inside my footage overall over here. If I turn it off, this is how it looks. If I turn it on, this is how it looks. And then I can add a little bit of pivot. It does make it darker, but we'll see, don't worry. I'm gonna bring it up just a little bit because it's getting too dark. So I'm gonna keep it around like 1.1. And I'm going to bring this up slightly and bring it closer to 0.51. So let's see, when I turn it off, this is how it looks. Now it has much more cinematic contrast. So it's starting to get there. It's starting to, go over there. The next thing I want to do is I want to add specific areas. The next thing I want to do is I want to add specific areas of contrast on my subject's face. I want to enhance this highlight part. I want to enhance this contrast part. I want to enhance the highlight part. So what I'm essentially saying is the part that is in the shadows, I want to make it darker. And the part that is within highlights, I want to make it lighter. I just want to see how that's going to look, okay? But then that also depends how much movement our footage has. So let's see if we're going to be able to track it. Hopefully. So I see that the part that's in lighting, she turns away from the camera and that at one point it just completely disappears, right? So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to enhance this part because this part is always somehow in front of the camera. Let's take a look at it. So the dark part of her face, you can see it. It goes into lighting and everything, but then, it comes back to being dark. So I'm going to say facial contrast or face contrast. And then I'm going to zoom in. When I zoom in, I press hold down command on my mouse button and on my I hold down command on my keyboard and I move my finger from down to up. This is how I scroll up when I'm zoomed into a footage. This is how I move vertically. And if I hold on Command and Shift and move my finger sideways, I can move sideways. So this is how I make those moves when I am zoomed into the footage. Okay, so I want to make some changes over here to her face. So I'm gonna go to the power windows area and then make a power window, make it smaller so that it's closer. It's basically covering our subject's face. And remember, this is just an example because if there's a lot of movement over here, we won't be able to work with this. But otherwise, in other areas where there's not a lot of movement, you can create power windows and track them and work efficiently with them. So I'm going to create it somewhat like this and increase the softness, of course. So I have it, let's say, around 4, 3.5, because this is a smaller power window. That's why. All right. And then I'm going to go to my color wheels. And first, of course, like I'm going to check my highlight area. Okay. What's the faded part? What's the fading looking like? Okay, it looks pretty decent. And then I'm going to come outside of my selection. And what I want to do is I want to bring down the contrast. So there are two things I can do over here. I can, because this part is in the midtones, I can bring down the midtones a little bit like that. This is how it looks. All right. And then I can also bump up the contrast slightly. Or maybe I can just get rid of the midtones. That's totally up to you, whichever setting you prefer. So not too much, because remember the overall contrast is also affecting the entire footage. So we also have to take that into account. So let's see, this is how it looked before. Now it's having much more cinematic contrast because I've basically darkened the dark parts of her face. Just slightly, not too much. So like that. Maybe bring down pivot just a little bit, right? And then press Z to zoom out and then C. So this is how everything looked when we had only made lighting changes. This is how it looks when we made our contrast changes. This is how it looked without any specific contrast changes and just with the general contrast. This is how it looks after. So it's much more cinematic because there's a lot more difference between the highlights and the shadows and everything, right? And I probably want to make the background a little bit darker because now that I'm working on the subject specific areas and everything, that is making the background lighter. So we also have to keep that into account. So I selected the background lighting node and I'm going to bring down gain slightly and then see how that affects everything. Press Z, right? And then on my subject, I'm going to bring down gain, but bump up my gamma because I want the subject to be lit, not the background. But of course, it's like a double-edged sword sometimes. And then make sure that the facial contrast node that I have, I go to tracker and then I track it backwards and forwards. So yeah, this is minimal movement. It is able to track it with my subject. So let's see what it looks like. I think it looks much more cinematic, the whole video, the whole footage now. So let's see when she's over here. Even then, see how it's making the difference? This is how it looked before with just a general contrast. This is how it looks now. So you guys are learning some pretty cool tricks over here. And I hope you're liking it. I'm kind of just creating a whole Rec 709 look with all of these nodes and everything. We're almost there. So let's look at it in full screen so that we have a much better idea. Okay. So this is how it looked without the contrast, and this is how it looks with the contrast. So I really like how the dark parts are darker and the light parts are lighter. See? So I really like how this is turning out. And the next thing I would do, this is a bonus part I'm going to teach you. The next thing I'm going to do is basically create, and I'm going to bring it down over here because of course, like, I don't want to create too many nodes over here, and I'm going to call it saturation. And I'm simply going to bump up the saturation. Let's see, 65, or maybe make it 75, right? And then we're going to work on the skin part just like I taught you. So I'm going to go and label this hue versus saturation so that, the skin doesn't look oversaturated. Then I'm going to go to the graphs, curves, go to the hue versus saturation. Same thing like I taught you, sample from the forehead. It's going to select those areas, select those individual pointers, widen the range so that we select as much area as possible, like that. And then select the middle part and then bring it down. Probably 1 point. Yeah, I think it looks good over here. So here, very oversaturated. Now it's not. Probably going to bring it slightly downwards even further, just until the second square behind this line, below this line. So this is how it looks before oversaturated skin. This is how it looks after. So let's see the video from start to finish in full screen. See? So I think we've created a pretty cool look over here. And in the next lesson, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you exactly how to create the faded contrast look. You'll see that look mainly in a lot of movies because this is good. This look is good when it comes to one footage or two footage, but it does end up getting heavy on the eyes when you start looking at it for hours and hours on end. So if I applied these settings on a movie, it was gonna get very straining for your eyes. That's why sometimes they also do faded contrast look. It looks much more cinematic, easy on the eyes, nice color grading, and it's easily absorbed by your eyes as well. So this is how I would do the cinematic high contrast look, where there's a big difference between my highlights and shadows when I would color grade a subject. In the bonus and then I will see you in the next lesson. Now in this lesson, we're going to create a faded contrast look. So I'm going to go ahead and now in this lesson, we're going to create a faded contrast look. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all my previous nodes up to the exposure because I just want to create it again with you. I want you to go through the entire process with me so that you are familiar with every step that we're going to take. So I've already fixed the white balance over here. I'm going to create another node and fix the overall lighting again for this look with you guys. And I'm going to do it quickly because we already went through this in the previous lesson. So you know exactly what we're doing. Bring up the gamma because I want the subject to stand out. Bring down gain. Bring down the highlights. Bring up the gamma slightly more. Bring down the highlights. And I have an overall lighting that I like. Go ahead, start creating my subject lighting node. So I'm going to light it almost in a similar way. I'm going to do the advanced lighting in the similar way. So this is where I want to teach you another method. And then we're going to go ahead and create everything like we did. So for example, if I want very specific lighting and very specific areas around my subject to be selected, I will select this pen tool in the power windows. And I will loosely draw around the boundaries of my subject. This is going to be like a custom shape. It takes more time and then tracking it becomes a bit difficult, but I just want to show you exactly how it's done. Just slightly select areas outside because I just don't want to select very close to the edges. I'm keeping it outside over here too because here is where the subject ends. And then loosely drawing around her hair, sorry. And then, so this is how I would draw a shape around my subject. And then I have these areas where it says softness. If I want to deal with the softness. So it's showing you exactly if you want to deal with inside, outside. So inside is going to bring the inside edge inside, and outside is going to bring the outside edge outside, again creating that buffer zone. Or you can work with overall softness. I just made these changes because I wanted you to see exactly what's happening visually. And then I come to highlight, and then I want to see exactly what's happening. So yeah, it's pretty okay. Now if I control the highlights and everything, this is only going to affect this area. It's not going to be a circle or everything, but we don't have to be that specific. I just wanted to show you this. So like if I bring down this offset wheel, this is only going to affect this area. If I bring down gain, only affects my subject. Bring down gamma, only affects my subject. But this is a very complex way of doing it. Only do it if you have a project that is paying you very high in terms of money and you have more time, and it's not a lengthy project where you don't have to do a lot of shots and everything. So you don't want to do that because that is going to be very time consuming. But I just wanted to show you how this works. So I'm going to reset the node grade, go to power windows again, click on the circle one, turn it into an oval, draw, just like make it envelop my subject as much as I can. All right, like this, and then see how it's going. This is how much it's selecting. I think it's fine. I'm just gonna bring it up slightly, like up to 3.5. I guess I'm good. Yeah. Slightly bring it to the right because I want to select as much of my subject as possible. All right, so now I have my subject lighting node. And then I'm gonna bring up gamma because I want the midtones to stand out. And bring down gain a little bit because I want the areas in the back and the lighting that's falling on the couch to not be too distracting. Bring up gamma. See how that's looking. Looks pretty cool. Yeah, there's like nobody can tell that I did all of those power windows and everything. It looks like okay, the lighting overall was fixed. And create a parallel node and do my background lighting. I make it a habit of pressing Command S every 2-3 minutes because I want to save everything. Even though DaVinci Resolve saves everything like with autosave, I just want to make sure. So please make that a habit as well. And I'm gonna make an oval around my subject. Again, the same thing that I did. And my subject is selected again. Increase the softness to let's say 3.5. I'm not going up to 5 because right now I see that when I check my highlights, this is enough. Like this transition I feel is enough. But if you feel like just don't go too high like this because this is really gonna mess everything up, right? So you just want to eyeball it a little bit. So I want to bring it up to let's say closer to 4, and I think I'm good. And then sorry, And then I'm gonna press this icon right next to the circle. Cool. That's gonna select everything outside of the selection. So this is how it looks. Slightly reposition it so that I get as much of my subject's hair outside of the selection. Of course, it can be perfect, but yeah. So I'm gonna bring down gain because I mainly want to reduce the highlights, but not too much that the transition from this part to this part outside looks fake. That's what I don't want. Okay, so let's select this, turn off. This is how it looks before with only the lighting, basic lighting correction. This is how it looks after. I think it looks pretty okay. I'm slightly going to bring it up because I don't want it to be completely, I don't want it to look completely fake. So right now this looks better. This is how it looked before. With basic lighting correction, this is how it looks after. So now the transition from the subject to the background and the surroundings is not too hard, not too I would say not too sudden. So this is how I showed you to do it. And the next thing I'm going to do is now I'm going to create another node by holding down Alt and S, holding down Alt and pressing S. And I'm going to call it contrast. But this time, I'm going to make a couple of, I'm just going to make one change that is slightly different. So I'm going to do the same thing, bring down contrast up to, let's say, 1.1, bring down pivot to 5.51. This looks much more cinematic. And I'm starting to get that look that I'm talking about, right? I'm starting to get that look. The other thing I'm going to do over here is this is where the magic happens. So when we bring down the contrast slider and bring down pivot, it starts giving us that high contrast look. But we want our shadows to be slightly faded. How do we do that? The trick to doing that is to go to the log wheels. And remember how we brought the shadow slider down when we wanted to create that intense look? This time, you're gonna bring it up, but not too much. Let's say by 15 points. So instead of darkening the shadows, and let me show you that on a separate node so that you understand it properly. All right. So I'm gonna hold on Alt, press S. It's gonna give me another node. And the reason I did not use the log wheel shadows and I did not bring it down when we were creating the high contrast look is because there's not a lot of intense lighting over here. So if I bring it down, it's gonna look really, like, see how the areas of her ears and everything is starting to disappear. I don't want that. That's why I didn't do it. But this is my personal method where I would just bring it down slightly. And then I have those dark blacks. They look very cinematic. Like, for example, this is how it looked before. This is how it will look after. Very cinematic. The blacks are much more darker. But the other way of going about it is, and you don't have to do it on a separate node like I'm doing it. I'm just doing it over here in a separate node because I want to show you by turning it on and off. The way you create that faded contrast look is that instead of bringing down the shadow slider, you slightly bring it up. And that makes your shadows flatter and slightly milkier. Very slightly. It's so slight, it's so subtle that it doesn't look unaesthetic. So if I turn it off, this is how the shadows looked. Look at the areas that are in shadows and everything. And if I turn it on, this is how it looks. And this is the look that they really like in the movies and everything. Let me show you. So press Ctrl D. This is how it looked. Much more contrasty look. Here, we just make the shadows slightly milkier. Maybe bring it up to 0.20, and that's how it works. This is what they really like. They like the shadows to be slightly faded. And a lot of the clients that are working on ads and everything, they really asked me to make this look for them. So this is how it looked before working with the log wheel shadows. Only the contrast, and this is how it looks after. I'm gonna slightly bring it down because it feels a bit too much. So I'm gonna bring it down to, let's say, 0.14. Now let's see it. So this is how it looked before without any log wheel shadows added. And this is how it looks after. And now let's add our colors and everything to see how it's gonna look. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did in the previous lesson. I will bump up the saturation. So I'll go to the wheels over here because I'm just used to doing that. Bring it up to 75. Saturation so that I remember it. Create another node, call it hue versus saturation. Go to the curves. Sample the forehead area. Do the same thing I taught you. Make the skin less saturated. So bring this down. And now let's look. So I'm gonna select these four, actually select this node only. So I'm gonna bring it down very slightly to this second square mark, second box mark, because I thought that it was looking a bit saturated. So this is how it looked when we created the other look, the high contrast look, and this is how it looks when we create the faded contrast look. See? So this is the main difference between the faded contrast look and the high contrast look. And I hope you understand the difference, and you can practice whichever one you like. So at the end of this section, we're going to be skipping the part where I put everything into practice because we almost reached the end of our course where we studied a lot of the main stuff, and we're only left with the effects and how to create looks with Filmlets and everything. At the end of the next section, I will be teaching you how to put everything into practice using all of these once I'm done teaching you how to create looks with Filmlets. So you already know how to create different looks with Rec 709. Now, from the next lesson onwards, I'm going to be teaching you how to create looks with Filmlets and how different film studios do it and how I do it. Sometimes I use LUTs, sometimes I don't. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at it.